we celebrate 10 years in Trinity in Japan. I founded Trinity in Japan on 5th of September 2014, 10 years ago, for three purposes. First, to serve the Trinity community. Bringing Trinity community together in Japan has already led to quite a number of cooperations and interactions between our community. For example, Fukumoto Sensei, one of the leading mathematicians in Japan, he created cooperations with Trinity mathematics alumni, or Trinity fellows in video discussions where I invited Japanese research leaders. This led to cooperations between Trinity fellows and Japanese research institutes, leading research institutes. The second point is to make Trinity known in Japan, which serves us all. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Third, there's big investments in business and other interactions between Japan and UK. And the UK investment, Japanese investments in UK are far larger than the other way around. And by far the largest example is by far the largest Japanese investment in UK is ARM, the semiconductor company ARM, which has been acquired by Japanese company SoftBank under Masayoshi Son. And the value of ARM is now, I think, $150 billion or so. So it's far more than any UK investment in Japan or other Japanese investments. So the biggest investment in Japan is Japanese investment in UK is in Cambridge. And actually, I did my PhD on the same desk in the Cavendish lab as one of the founders of ARM. So if you spend some time in Japan, or you do business in Japan, or you work in Japan, you will know that trust and reputation are very important. So the university you come from is very, very important. People often ask you, one of the first things when you meet new people in Japan is they ask you which university you graduated from. So if you come and say, oh, I'm a Harvard fellow, or I graduated from MIT or from Stanford, people say, wow. And Cambridge, and especially Trinity College, is far less known. And often people even think about Harry Potter when you talk about the Cambridge College. So, but at the same time, Trinity College has 34 Nobel Prize winners and huge impact in the world. Cambridge University has about 120 Nobel Prize winners and including Trinity, also enormous impact in the world. So that impact isn't so well known in Japan. And so with Trinity in Japan, I want to help to spread the message. So that will help, it helps everybody, and it helps particularly, for example, Trinity students or Trinity researchers or Trinity fellows who come to Japan. They'll have an easier time if Cambridge and Trinity College are better known in Japan. So what am I doing to change this? To build trust and recognition for the benefit of Trinity people in Japan. So one of the things is I organize joint events between Trinity Japan and Japanese organizations. And for example, I talk with people. For example, recently I talked to the chief of strategic industries of the industry ministry, who was very, very interested in ARM, because of the importance for Japan's rebuilding of the semiconductor industry. And so he was very surprised why ARM should grow out of Cambridge, where Cambridge, he thought, is not a semiconductor hotspot in the world, whereas Silicon Valley is. So he was expecting that ARM should come out of Silicon Valley, or at least out of Boston. So he asked me, why Cambridge? So I explained him about Cambridge and Trinity College. And on our next event on 8th of October will be the event with the previous Vice Chancellor, the Trinity alumni and Honorary Fellow of Trinity, Stephen Toop. And I think this industry ministry official working on the strategic industry for Japan, I think he told me that he might be joining. So for the event with Vice Chancellor Stephen Toop on 8th of October, where I hope many of you will come. I'm bringing together both Trinity alumni, and I'm kind of headhunting Japanese leaders, especially Cambridge graduates who have started companies, who are entrepreneurs, who are CEOs of companies, and other Japanese leaders to bring leadership together, to have this discussion with Stephen Toop, but also to get to know each other and to increase the impact of Trinity College in Japan among Japanese leaders. So my aim here is to make it easier for Trinity community to interact with Japan and to do what they want to do in Japan, joint research or business or entrepreneur or starting companies or seeking investment or wanting to invest. Why did I start Trinity Japan? Another reason is personal. I spent a very big chunk of my life at Trinity and the Cavendish. I worked about 13 years at Trinity and the Cavendish, first for my PhD, then a research fellow, then as a teaching fellow and director of studies. So I had countless discussions with Trinity fellows, Trinity students. I was teaching Trinity students, and hundreds of dinners on High Table. And some of the discussions I had on High Table, they still resonate with me and influence and are part of my DNA and a part of what I do. So at that time, why did I come to Japan? The reason is I'm a semiconductor physicist, and in those days, Japan had 85% of the global semiconductor industry and market. So I felt I needed to understand what's going on in Japan in semiconductor industry. Today, at that time, Japan had 85% or so of the global semiconductor industry. Today, about only 15% is left. And so why is this? And another point which is very interesting is Japan is now rebuilding its semiconductor industry. So many people in government and leaders in Japan told me that Japan is at the pivot point. So they feel that it's kind of the last chance for Japan to revive. That's their feeling. And so that makes it very, very interesting to be in Japan right now and to work in this rebuilding of Japan or the pivot of Japan to a new business model. Now, why is Japan in a situation where Japan feels they need to reposition or rebuild or reorient and pivot? One of the interesting points about Japan is between 1633 and 1639, the shogun Tokugawa Iemitsu closed down Japan, locked down Japan. So between 1633 and about until 1853, until Commodore Matthew Perry, an American Commodore Navy officer, he came to Japan in 1853, 200 years later, and with his black ships, and more or less forced Japan to open up for trade with US and global trade. So Japan between 1633 and 1853, so more than 200 years, Japan was more or less locked down. There was some very controlled trade, very limited trade, but essentially there was a death penalty ongoing in and out of Japan. So this period is called Sakoku, closed country or locked down country. So this more than 200 years of lockdown of Japan has created many effects which are still current today, and many people there's still some of this lockdown mentality still left in some people in some spaces in Japan. But at the same time, the other side of the coin is this more than 200 years of sakoku and lockdown is one of the reasons for what makes Japan so fascinating for us, because Japan was always rich country. Japan was always rich. It's now rich, was rich for many hundred years. And Japan was forced to create new ways of creativity. So Japan has its own creativity, its own like manga and many other forms of creativity, and blue LEDs. There are many inventions which revolutionize the world which come from Japan. Now, one of the interesting things is before Japan locked down in 1633, the first Japanese student came to Trinity College before the lockdown. His name is Uriemon Eaton, or William Eaton, and he matriculated in Japan in 1633, just before the lockdown of Japan, the Sakoku period started. And he was the son of a British warrior or tradesman and a Japanese wife. So he was half Japanese, or half British and English and half Japanese, and he was the first student apparently who was matriculated 1633 in Japan, just before Sakoku started. So Sakoku thinking remains, but Sakoku is probably a big factor why we find Japan so interesting and fascinating and so full of opportunities for us. So with that, next speaker is Ivan Sorrentino, who will speak about English language and Japan, which is also influenced by the Sakoku and factors I explained. Thank you so much.